So we are smack in the middle of a psychedelic renaissance. You know the story. Substances like MDMA and LSD are being seriously explored for their therapeutic potential. And the main narrative is that when they're used correctly, they're remarkably safe. But what happens outside of the lab? What happens in the real world? Well, a deep dive into a massive global database just turned up a really surprising signal that kind of challenges what we thought we knew. So let's just start with the main question, right? What really is the biggest risk when someone takes psychedelics out in the wild? Is it having a bad trip? Is it heart problems? Or is it something else entirely? The answer, it turns out, is not what you'd expect at all.
Okay, and here it is. This is the central puzzle we're going to unpack today. The World Health Organization's own global database shows a stronger statistical link, a stronger risk signal for substance abuse disorders with MDMA and LSD than with the opioid oxycodone. I know, that sounds completely backwards, right? So how is that even possible?
To get our heads around this, we've got to unpack where this data comes from and, more importantly, what it's really telling us. Because this is one of those cases where the truth is way more complicated than the headline. The key to this whole mystery lies inside the database itself. And this is not your typical clinical trial data. This is something much, much bigger and, honestly, a lot messier. The source for all of this is a database called VigiBase. It's the WHO's global hub for potential side effects. The best way to think of it is like a giant planet-wide early warning system. We're talking over 30 million reports from doctors and patients in more than 180 countries. It's basically a global neighborhood watch for medications, picking up on potential issues as they're being used by millions of real people. And this slide really nails the difference here. You have two totally different worlds of data. On one hand, you have clinical trials. They're clean, they're controlled with super strict screening for who gets in. On the other hand, you have VigiBase. That's the real world. It's messy, it's unpredictable, and literally anyone can submit a report. It captures the complex reality of how people actually use substances, which is precisely why it can surface these kinds of unexpected findings. So let's dive into the raw numbers. What are people actually reporting when it comes to psychedelics? And right away, a really clear pattern just jumps off the page. The vast, overwhelming majority of these reports are for MDMA and LSD. I mean, look at that. Over 1,500 reports for MDMA, almost 400 for LSD. Meanwhile, you lump Psilocybin, DMT, and mescaline all together, and you only get 89 reports. This is exactly why the researchers focus their analysis on MDMA and LSD, because that's where the data is. Okay, so what kinds of problems are we talking about? Well, for MDMA, nearly a third of all adverse events fall under one category: psychiatric disorders. That is a huge slice of the pie, more than double the next two categories combined. This tells us something really important. The main concern people are reporting isn't physical, it's psychological. And this is where we get to the most surprising part of the whole analysis. To put this risk into perspective, the researchers did something really smart. They compared the psychedelic data to a substance we all know has a high potential for abuse, the opioid oxycodone. Now, the method they used is called disproportionality analysis. Don't worry about the jargon. The best way to think about it is as a risk smoke signal. It's a clever statistical tool that scans millions of reports to see if a certain side effect pops up way more often with one drug compared to all the others. It's like seeing a plume of smoke on the horizon. It doesn't prove there's a fire, but it's a really strong hint telling scientists exactly where they need to go look. And on this chart, you can actually see those smoke signals. Each dot shows how strong the signal is. The further to the right it is, the stronger the signal. A dot at 1 means no signal at all. Now, look at the line for substance use disorder. The signal for oxycodone is around 3.5, but for MDMA and LSD, the signals are massive, 71 for LSD and almost 130 for MDMA. I mean, they're not even in the same ballpark. It's the same story for alcohol abuse and substance abuse. The smoke signals for the psychedelics are just way, way bigger. The researchers themselves state it very plainly. They say that with a single exception of drug dependence, which is a clinical term often tied to prescription use, the risk signals for every other kind of substance abuse were significantly stronger for LSD and MDMA than for oxycodone. This is a pretty stunning finding. So we have to ask the obvious question, right? How on earth is this possible? Are we completely wrong about the safety of these substances? Well, this is where the story takes a really crucial turn. The data seems to be screaming at us that, from a substance abuse perspective, psychedelics are riskier than a powerful opioid. But
Decades of research tell us that's just not the case. They aren't considered addictive in the same way pharmacologically. So what is going on here? What are we missing?
And here it is. The researchers give us the answer themselves. They say it's plausible that the signal they're seeing is being amplified by other drugs people are using at the same time as the psychedelics. It might not be the psychedelic itself causing the problem. And this is the absolute key to the whole puzzle. When people are using psychedelics recreationally, they're often using other things too. In fact, one survey found over 70% of psychedelic users also use cannabis, and almost 60% also drink alcohol. And of course, both of those substances have their own well-established risks for abuse and dependence. So what the vision-based system is probably picking up on is not the effect of the psychedelic in a vacuum, but the real-world consequences of this combined use. Okay, so let's zoom out and try to put all these pieces together. What should we actually make of this complex, real-world safety picture?
So here's the balanced view. First, this massive database showed very, very few reports of serious physical harm. Things like heart problems, overdoses, birth defects, incredibly rare. The main risk signal is clearly psychiatric, and it's centered on substance abuse. But, and this is the giant butt in the room, that signal is most likely being driven by the context of the use, especially the co-use of alcohol and cannabis. It just highlights this huge critical difference between taking a substance in a controlled therapeutic setting versus taking it in an uncontrolled recreational one. And all of this leaves us with a final, really critical question. As these incredibly powerful substances move from the fringes into mainstream culture and medicine, the real challenge isn't just understanding the drug itself. It's understanding the user. How do we separate the inherent risks of the molecule from the very human risks of how, where, and why it's being used? And that might just be the most important question of the entire psychedelic renaissance.